So we're starting off today with a quote from our source material that just completely blew my mind.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Right. Okay, here it is. Quote, I had the misfortune or the fortune to learn how to read fluently starting about the age of 3. So I had read maybe 150 books by the time I hit first grade, and I already knew the teachers were lying to me. End quote.
I mean, that is just a wild perspective for a 6-year-old to have.
Seriously.
You normally expect a kid in first grade to just, soak up whatever the teacher writes on the chalkboard,
Mm,
completely unquestioning.
yeah, exactly.
So to already view the established system with that level of skepticism, it's incredibly rare.
It really is. And that profound skepticism of established systems sets up the subject of our deep dive today perfectly. Because that precocious, doubtful 6-year-old grew up to be a man named Alan Kay.
A name that, honestly, everybody should know.
Absolutely. Because if you were listening to us right now on a laptop or, swiping through a tablet or just staring at a desktop monitor with overlapping windows on the screen,
Which is probably most of you.
right, you are interacting with a digital world that Alan Kay essentially architected. I mean, he led the design of the modern graphical user interface. He conceived the very first tablet and laptop concepts, and he pioneered what we now call object-oriented programming.
Which is a resume that fundamentally defined the modern technological era. I mean, it's massive.
Yeah, it's almost hard to wrap your head around one person doing all that.
But simply listing his inventions kind of misses the core of who he is.
Right.
To really understand Kay's philosophy, you have to look at his underlying motivation. He never looked at computers as, like, calculators or business tools for accounting. He viewed them strictly as dynamic platforms for human education.
And that brings us to the real mission of our deep dive into these biographical sources today. We want to explore this massive, almost baffling contradiction about him.
Yeah, this is the craziest part.
How does the man who built the digital house you literally live in right now fundamentally believe and loudly argue that, quote, the computer revolution hasn't happened yet?
It's a huge claim to make, especially coming from someone who won a Turing Award.
Right, the Nobel Prize of Computing.
Exactly. But to understand why he views our current technology as a failure, we really need to trace how he arrived at computer science in the first place.
Hmm.
Because his background was, well, it was anything but traditional.
Not traditional at all. I mean, he grew up originally in Springfield, Massachusetts, moved around a bit, and eventually landed at Bethany College in West Virginia.
But he wasn't studying what you'd expect, right?
No, not at all. He wasn't doing electrical engineering or math as his primary focus. He actually majored in biology.
Which is wild.
And outside of academics, he was a professional jazz guitarist. He taught guitar in Denver.
I love that detail.
Yeah, and the only reason he even became a programmer was because he was drafted into the military, went into the Air Force, and just happened to pass an aptitude test for computer programming.
And that exact combination of disciplines is really the key to his entire mindset.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I struggle to see how that connects. I mean, a jazz-playing biology major accidentally stumbling into a computer lab.
I mean, it sounds like a joke setup.
It does.
Yeah.
How does playing jazz chords or, like, studying cell structures translate to shaping the future of computer science? Did his background in molecular biology make him view computers as, I don't know, living, breathing ecosystems rather than just rigid metal boxes?
Yes, that is exactly it. Think about the nature of those two fields. In biology, you're looking at incredibly complex living systems made up of autonomous cells.
Okay.
They interact, they adapt, they survive based on communication. And then in jazz, you have this foundational structure, but the magic happens through profound improvisation, flow, and responding to the other musicians in real time.
So it's all about adaptability.
Exactly. When Kay started his graduate work at the University of Utah in the late 60s, he brought that organic, flexible mindset into a field that was historically super rigid.
Because computers back then were basically just giant, inflexible calculators.
Right.
Yeah.
But Kay was already conceptualizing systems that could adapt and extend. I mean, his 1969 doctoral dissertation was literally titled FLEX, a flexible, extendable language.
Wow. So he's looking at computers through the lens of living organisms and artistic improvisation.
Yeah.
And looking at the sources, they really point to 1968 as the year everything crystallized for him. He has 2 massive encounters that year.
Huge turning points.
Yeah. The first is meeting a man named Seymour Papert.
And Papert is a crucial figure here. He introduced Kay to a programming dialect called Logo.
Oh, I've heard of Logo.
Yeah, Logo was optimized specifically for education. And through it, Kay was exposed to the learning theories of Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky, specifically this concept called constructionism.
Okay, so the sources mention constructionism a lot, but I'm not entirely sure what that actually looks like in practice. How does it differ from just, regular teaching?
Well, the traditional view of education is that a child is essentially an empty vessel, right?
Mm.
And a teacher's job is to pour facts into that vessel.
You sit at a desk, the teacher talks, you memorize.
Exactly. But constructionism argues the exact opposite. It argues that children learn best by actively building things, by constructing their own knowledge through direct experience.
So how did Logo actually do that with a computer? Because this is the late 60s.
Right. So Logo allowed kids to program a digital turtle on the screen.
Okay.
By typing simple commands, they could make the turtle move forward, turn, draw lines. So if a child wanted to draw a square, they had to figure out that the turtle needed to move forward, turn 90 degrees, and repeat that process 4 times.
Oh, wow.
So they weren't just memorizing the rules of geometry from a blackboard. They were physically building geometry. They were experiencing the math.
That is brilliant. So Kay realizes the computer isn't a calculator at all. It's an interactive environment where a child can actually construct their own understanding of the world.
Exactly.
And then later that same year, in December of 1968, he attends what is now known as the Mother of All Demos in San Francisco.
A legendary moment in tech history.
Truly. This was Douglas Engelbart's landmark presentation that basically previewed modern computing. But the detail that really stands out to me in the sources, and this is so cinematic, is that Kay was sick with a high fever that day.
Yeah, he was super ill.
He's sitting in this dark auditorium, literally burning up, watching Engelbart demonstrate the computer mouse, hypertext, and network screens for the first time. He later called it one of the greatest experiences of his life.
I mean, it sounds like a literal fever dream.
Yeah.
But the timing of it was so critical because meeting Papert gave Kay the educational philosophy, right? The why.
Right.
But Engelbart's demo gave him the mechanical capability, the how. Kay saw that the machine could be highly interactive and responsive, and he knew exactly what that interactivity should be used for.
Giving children a dynamic medium to construct knowledge,
Exactly.
but, wanting to build a revolutionary educational tool and actually having the resources to do it are two very different things.
Oh, absolutely.
He needed a place where he could literally invent the future. And that drive to build this ultimate digital playground leads him to turn down a professorship at Carnegie Mellon in 1970, and instead, he joins the research staff at Xerox PARC in Palo Alto.
And we have to emphasize, Xerox PARC in the 1970s was arguably the greatest concentration of computing talent in history.
It was basically the Avengers of computer science.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was there that Kay synthesized his vision into a concept he called the Dynabook.
Okay, so for you listening, when we talk about the Dynabook, I want you to picture the conceptual ancestor to the iPad or a modern laptop. Kay was drawing up plans for a portable, flat-screen, interactive device decades before the hardware even existed to mass produce it.
And what's fascinating here is the physical design was completely prophetic, sure, but the intended purpose is what actually matters most.
Yeah.
Kay did not design the Dynabook so that businessmen could read spreadsheets on an airplane. He conceived it strictly as an educational platform for children. He wanted a device that a child could carry to the park, use it to simulate physics, write programs, explore music, making him one of the very first researchers into mobile learning.
But this presents a massive design problem, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if you want a 7-year-old to simulate physics on a portable screen, you can't have them typing cryptic green text commands into a black terminal.
Right, that wouldn't work at all.
It has to be intuitive. It has to be visual.
Which is exactly why Kay and his team had to invent the modern graphical user interface. To make the Dynabook's educational simulations accessible to kids, they created the concept of overlapping windows, icons, and menus.
Just incredible.
And they developed the Smalltalk programming language to run it all.
Okay, but I have a major question about this.
Shoot.
I understand he built the graphical interface for kids, but I am looking at overlapping windows on my screen right now, and I use them to, fill out soul-crushing expense reports and manage my calendar.
Yeah, the corporate reality.
Right. So if this was explicitly meant for childhood education, how did it wind up defining the corporate desktop metaphor we are all still chained to today? Did Kay just abandon the educational vision to get funding from Xerox?
No, he didn't abandon it at all. He was essentially running a stealth operation.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Xerox management wanted PRC to invent the office of the future. They wanted better tools for secretaries and executives. So Kay and his group were ostensibly building those tools, but they were using them to quietly test his educational theories on children in local schools.
That is amazing.
The irony is that the interface they designed to be simple enough for a child was so universally intuitive that the commercial world just co-opted it.
Of course they did.
The corporate industry looked at overlapping windows and thought, wow, this is perfect for organizing office files. So they took the visual metaphor and just completely ignored the underlying educational philosophy. The underlying technology was so revolutionary that it bled into everything.
So they aimed for a child's imagination and hit the corporate cubicle.
Precisely. The industry took the surface-level convenience, but left behind all the deeper dynamic capabilities Kay actually wanted to provide.
And that dynamic of the industry taking his invention but missing the point entirely, that brings us to what is probably his most famous contribution to software engineering and also his biggest regret.
Oh, yeah.
Along with his colleagues at PARC, Alan Kay is considered one of the fathers of object-oriented programming. He actually coined the term OOP.
And object-oriented programming eventually became the dominant way commercial software is built.
Yeah.
If you're using a popular app or software program today, it was almost certainly built using concepts derived from OOP.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The sources reveal he is incredibly frustrated by this. There's a quote where he says, quote, "I'm sorry that I long ago coined the term objects for this topic because it gets many people to focus on the lesser idea." And then he follows it up by saying, "The big idea is messaging." And I have to admit, I read that several times and I'm still confused. If the entire paradigm is called object-oriented, why are the objects the least important part? How does this differ from the way people programmed before?
Okay, let's break it down. Before OOP, the standard was procedural programming. Imagine procedural programming as a very long, very rigid recipe. Do step 1, then step 2, then step 3.
Okay.
The data and the actions you perform on the data are totally separate. So if the program gets too large, that recipe becomes a tangled, unmanageable mess where changing one step ruins the whole dish.
So how did Kay's object-oriented approach change that?
This is where we need to look back at his biology background.
Wait, you mean thinking about it like actual biological cells?
Exactly. Think about a human body. Your body isn't run by a single, massive, centralized set of instructions.
Right.
It's made of billions of independent cells. A muscle cell has its own local memory and its own internal processes. A nerve cell has its own. The nerve cell doesn't need to know the internal mechanics of the muscle cell to make it twitch. It just sends a chemical signal, a message.
Ah, I see. So in software, instead of one giant recipe, Kay wanted programmers to focus on static... Wait, no, he didn't want static cells. He wanted them to build independent little entities, objects that acted like living cells.
Right. And the crucial part is how they interact. Kay wanted developers to focus on the fluid, dynamic signals passing between these entities. The messaging, the negotiation.
Like a nervous system.
Exactly. But when the commercial software industry adopted OOP, they didn't focus on the organic, flexible messaging system. They focused almost entirely on the objects. They used objects as a way to rigidly categorize data and structure code, treating them like static Lego bricks rather than living cells.
So they took his brilliant biological ecosystem and turned it back into a rigid filing cabinet. No wonder, he says, the term objects distracted everyone from the real idea.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to understand it. He feels his invention was fundamentally misunderstood. The industry adopted the mechanics of his system, but entirely stripped away the organic, adaptable soul of it.
Man, so what does a visionary do when the industry fundamentally misinterprets his life's work?
Well, he leaves, and he keeps moving.
Yeah, the narrative tracks him leaving Xerox PR and becoming this incredibly elite, nomadic researcher. I mean, look at this run. He becomes the chief scientist at Atari from 1981 to 1984. Then an Apple Fellow.
Yep.
Then he's recruited by Bran Ferren to be a Disney Fellow at Walt Disney Imagineering, and eventually a Senior Fellow at HP Labs.
He is moving through the absolute titans of technology and entertainment, but his motivation never wavers.
Never.
He's just trying to find a corporate environment that will actually fund and support his original educational vision. And he never, ever stops tinkering. In 2001, he launched the Viewpoints Research Institute to focus entirely on children, learning, and advanced software development.
And the sources mention that he and his teams created several open-source collaborative environments, things with names like Squeak, eToys, Croquet, and Tweak, which pushed past the limits of previous interface architectures. But instead of just listing them off, what did these programs actually do? Like if a child sits down with eToys, what are they actually experiencing?
So eToys is basically the perfect realization of that early logo turtle concept, but vastly more powerful. If a child uses eToys, they aren't just drawing a static picture. They might draw a picture of a car, but then they can open up a visual menu and drag and drop command tiles to give that car a steering wheel,
Oh,
or tell it to move forward at a certain speed, or
right.
tell it to bounce off the edge of the screen. They are actively authoring their own media. They are building their own interactive simulations of physics or mathematics completely visually.
It's the Dynabook philosophy brought to life in software. And that persistence actually leads to a massive physical realization, too, right around 2005. At the World Summit on the Information Society, an initiative spearheaded by Kay's friend Nicholas Negroponte was unveiled, the One Laptop Per Child program.
Right, the $100 laptop.
Yeah, or the children's machine.
And Kay was a prominent co-developer on that project, focusing specifically on the educational software suite, using those exact squeak-in eToys environments.
I mean, think about the timeline for you listening. He sketches out the Dynabook in the early 1970s. And over 30 years later, he is helping to physically build and distribute that exact ideal. A cheap, durable, highly capable learning machine given to children in developing nations all over the world. It is an incredible triumph of patience.
It really is.
But strangely, even with that victory, Kay looks at the broader state of modern technology and feels incredibly dismayed. He begins lecturing extensively on the theme that eventually becomes the title of his 2003 Turing Award talk about the computer revolution hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. And, earning the Turing Award is the equivalent of winning the Nobel Prize in computing. So when the Nobel laureate of your field says the revolution hasn't happened, you really have to look at what he is criticizing.
Right.
And his primary target is the massive, bloated mess of modern commercial software. He calls it reinventing programming.
He argues that commercial operating systems and applications today consume hundreds of millions of lines of code. Why is that? Like, why does a modern operating system need 50 million lines of code just to function?
It mostly comes down to how commercial software is built and maintained. Companies rarely start from scratch. They take older code bases and just stack new features, new patches, and new graphical layers right on top of them.
Oh, like a digital Jenga tower.
Exactly. You end up with this towering, incredibly fragile system where a single bug, hidden deep in millions of lines of legacy code, can crash an entire server. It's inefficient, it's practically unreadable for a single human being, and it is the exact opposite of the elegant, organic systems Kay envisioned.
So rather than just complaining about it, he actually does something. He secures funding from the National Science Foundation for a radical proposal called STEP S, which stands for Steps Toward Expressive Programming Systems. And he poses this wild question to the world. Could we cover all the functionality of modern personal computing in a practical Model T design using just 20,000 lines of code?
Which is insane. Going from hundreds of millions of lines down to 20,000 sounds technically impossible. But his approach relies on that Model T concept you just mentioned.
Right, and I understand the Model T analogy. Historically, Henry Ford revolutionized automobiles by moving away from bespoke, custom-built cars to standardized, interchangeable parts, stripping away everything non-essential. But how does that translate to software? How do you standardize code to shrink it that drastically?
By not writing the code manually. Instead of having thousands of programmers write millions of lines of instructions for every single function, Kay's team proposed creating specialized, highly efficient, domain-specific languages.
Okay, what does that mean?
Essentially, you write a very small, elegant piece of code whose only job is to write other code. You build a system that can generate what it needs on the fly, rather than hard-coding every single possibility beforehand. It's about finding the absolute fundamental building blocks of computing and letting the system express itself efficiently.
So he is still applying that biological mindset. A seed doesn't contain a tiny, fully formed oak tree inside it. It just contains the highly compressed, elegant instructions for how to build an oak tree.
That is exactly the mechanism. And while the STEPS IF program was an experimental research project, the goal wasn't necessarily to replace Windows or Mac OS overnight.
Right.
The goal was to prove that we don't have to accept bloated, inefficient software just because it's what the industry currently sells us.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all this together. We started with a skeptical 6-year-old boy in Springfield who had read 150 books and realized the adults didn't have all the answers. We followed him as he merged the complex systems of biology and the improvisation of jazz into computer science. We saw him take a fever dream at a 1968 tech demo and translate it into a lifelong mission to give children a dynamic platform to construct their own knowledge.
Which is an amazing journey.
And to do that, he had to invent the overlapping windows on your screen, conceptualize the tablet computer, and pioneer object-oriented programming, winning the 2003 Turing Award along the way.
And through all of that, moving through PARC, Apple, and Disney, he never treated computer science as an end in itself. He only ever viewed the technology as a vehicle for human communication and learning.
He essentially built the digital house we all live in today. But his greatest legacy isn't the graphical user interface, and it isn't the laptop. His greatest legacy might be that he is standing on the lawn of that digital house, pointing at it, and telling us it's just a poorly constructed, temporary shack.
Yet, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Kay proves that the foundational ideas of computing are still entirely malleable. By calling current software a bloated mess and insisting the revolution hasn't even started, he is basically daring the next generation to tear down the walls and build something truly transformative.
It is a persistent, nagging reminder that we shouldn't settle for the technology we have.
Right. We've settled for the first commercially viable draft of computing. The tools we use today are incredible, but they are not the end of history.
And that is the thought I want to leave you with today. The next time you open your laptop or, swipe to unlock your tablet or click an icon on your desktop, look closely at the screen and ask yourself a question. If this incredibly powerful, world-connecting technology you're holding is just the clumsy, bloated, rough draft of the digital age, what is the actual revolution going to look like? Maybe we all need to channel a little bit of that 6-year-old Alan Kay, look at the systems built by the adults around us, and realize we don't have to accept the story we've been told.